Hi and welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for being on the show. How's life in the UK?
Life in the UK is pretty good, actually. The coronavirus situation is getting better, so we're socialising a bit more, and the sun is out, so we're barbecuing. Even though I would probably barbecue in the pouring rain, I don't
Really?
care. I'm having that barbecue. The sun's out, so it's really great here right now.
Well, I do have to share a secret with you that Monday night at our place is barbecue steak every Monday night. Rain, hail, or shine. So I've had a big piece of steak. So I apologize to all the vegetarians and the vegans out there. I don't want to get off on the wrong foot straight up, but yeah, but it's
But if
it's
anybody does return back to eating steak, to be fair, I've since getting a good barbecue, I've realised that the only way to really eat steak is off the barbecue.
yes, it is. It's
So
amazing.
good.
Yes, but I don't know how you have time to barbecue at the moment. You've been really busy. You have so much going on, not only in your professional life, but you have a new baby boy. You've moved
That's right.
house. There's so much going on. How's the baby going?
The baby's awesome. Yeah. He's guzzling. He's long. Because we've got also a 2 and a 3/4 year old daughter. So some of the things like cots and whatnot,
Yes.
things to sleep in, sleeping bags, that kind of thing. Obviously, we had them ready for him, so you can repurpose those things, and then you realize how different your children are. And then
Oh,
so my first daughter is like really bijou. She only born at 6 pounds. He comes along at like nearly 9 pounds, and
wow.
everything that she had at like 3 months old, he's too long for it. So so it's like, oh, he's doing great, a little bit too great, to be fair. We got to catch up with all the
Wow.
all the extra bits.
That's amazing. I usually siblings are very close in weight and size, but to have a 3 pound difference is quite extreme and extraordinary. So you,
Absolutely.
as a child, were you a big baby?
Well, I think I was, slap bang on average. But
Oh,
as a grown man, I think I'm on the taller side at 6'2".
oh, right. I can't imagine you being average at anything. And if I remember, and if I remember rightly, when we were speaking last, you told me the story that your father was in the army. So,
That's right.
so how did he feel about having a son that obviously you must have been very tall from a very young age, and you deciding that you were going to go into the performing arts rather than being a soccer player? Or do you call it football over there?
Yeah, football. Yeah,
Okay, rather than being a football player, he ends up having a son who is going to be a performer.
yeah. And back then, I mean, I was born in the early '80s, right? So, um, I think singers back then were like it's almost like we're a mystical rare breed. If somebody could sing in the family, it was like, right, someone can sing in the family. Let's all
Wow.
sit down. It was unusual, right? Certainly in my world, anyway, for there to be someone who was genuinely good at singing. So you had that kind of like when that sort of, I guess, cultural background underpins it. It would be unusual to have that. So nobody's used to somebody coming out and saying, "Well, I'm a singer in the family. I want to be a performer." And I think initially, because my dad was in the army, I think he would have liked for me to join in the army. But I
Mm-hmm.
think as I grew into sort of my early teens and whatnot, and getting to the point where you would make that decision, I think he definitely realised that I probably wasn't cut out for the army, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
he was like,
yeah.
no. He's
No.
in his own words, he's like, I can't hear the killer instinct in you, and I'm like, yeah, that's fair enough, Dad. But then, so for me to want to go into music was like it was a bit of a no-no to begin with, and that's
Mm.
just again the culture.
Yes.
So I definitely did put off that aspiration, I think, for quite a while. But I think in the later years when I started to get on stage, and also this works, by the way, when you sing the type of music by accident, that is, that your dad likes. So I ended up singing Motown, and
Oh,
then of,
good
of
taste.
course, of course, my dad's like, wow, yes, you should definitely be professional. So
Yeah.
I think he really got on board when I started to actually gig more, and he started to listen to me and go, actually, maybe he can sing. Actually,
So did he put you into singing lessons at all?
I put myself into them. Actually, I was a very bad sort of paper boy. You know, I just, messed up, delivered the wrong half of papers to the wrong half of the paper round. But still, I used that, whatever it would be, £15, £20, after I'd gone back and collected all the papers back and delivered them to the right houses.
Oh,
I
good
still
man.
had I still had £20, and that went on before I had singing lessons. I'm pretty sure it went on cream eggs, which was a
I know.
confectionery. Oh,
Yes.
you know those? Okay,
We
fair
have
enough.
cream eggs in Australia.
Okay, yeah,
We're
cool.
not
I
a
thought
third
you
world
guys in
country.
Canada would know.
No, no, no. We are not a third world country here. We have something other than kangaroos in Australia, believe it or not.
Oh, I had the stereotypical view of
Yeah.
Australia in my head just then. Yeah,
Okay.
and so yeah, I did spend that money then on a singing teacher. That was recommended to me when I was about 12 years old. I was singing in a youth club, and somebody was like, "Oh, you sing? Here's my singing teacher's number." And I went to see that guy called Robin Gare, and that was it. So I ended up spending that money a few years later after finding that number, and that was really, I think, when you look at it, the singing lessons themselves were insanely basic,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I was just kind of being championed, and he enjoyed my style and voice, so he couldn't wait to get me into a choir. So really, as far as £20 goes, that was probably the best £20 I'd ever spent, because it did really change my trajectory amongst other things. But that
Yes,
was really a turning point for me.
yes. And let's be honest here, if you're going through voice change, you really do need a teacher that is going to champion you after all and be your cheerleader, because that is really an awkward time too, almost at 12, as you're starting to go through voice change to begin lessons.
Yeah, and I think much like any person going through the voice change anyway, you'd probably be able to empathize with me when my voice was definitely not very stable. Some
Mm,
people have a fast change. Some people have way more instability, and for me it was like a lot of flipping, basically Mickey Mouse,
oh
which ended up
no.
being my nickname for
Oh
quite a
no,
while.
that's cruel.
And in a boys' school, boys' school just kind of
Mm,
quite a bit more cutting, I think, than when I was in mixed school before. Um, so yeah, the boys' school, but nevertheless, I think that sort of subliminally gave me this consciousness about my own voice,
yes. How
which
did you overcome that?
well, I mean, time definitely was the only healer on that one, I think.
Mm,
But what it led me to do, I can take some of those comments. They were just a laugh. This is not like kind of a public outcry to how they affected my career. It really isn't. But everything contributes to everything, doesn't it? So
yes,
when I think about that, I think about deepening my voice when I was about 15, thinking,
right.
speak down there, man. Kind of keep it away from that flip, and you'll be absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll sound more authoritative or something like that on as a added benefit. But I do distinctly remember that giving me a rather dark voice for quite a
Yes,
long time,
yes.
taking me off my level. And I do remember range, especially in chest voice or like belting and stuff like that, real pain in the bum for like 7 years, 8 years, a long time,
That's a
until I
long,
got into
that
my
is.
20s.
That is a long time. Now, I know that you had an amazing performance career, even though when I was stalking you on the web, there wasn't a lot of information about you having had a performance career, and that only just came out really between you and I having a chat. So you would have started your career at that that time where your voice was still settling, because didn't you start performing professionally at 21?
Yeah, about then. Yeah. So after a little stint in the choir, and choir singing was every Monday,
Mm,
maybe an extra rehearsal if you had a show coming up, and then a show once every few months, if you like. So that's not a strong workload. So whatever I did in that time, I could, for want of a better word, shout my way stylistically through a song, and make it to the end on a Monday night, and then I'd recover by Friday.
Oh,
Because that was me. I didn't know that this wasn't supposed to be hard. So that was me as a teenager. So then hooking up with some band members and then starting to get into professional gigging,
yes.
it only takes 2 gigs in a row for you to realize, wow, this is really unsustainable. Friday and Saturday night, and then you're like, oh my God, Saturday night is so hard. And then you get to Monday, pretty much not recovered by Monday's rehearsal again. And so I just kind of shouted my way through that one, and then get yourself to Friday or Saturday again. But then, because we did quite a good job with what we were doing and people enjoyed the demeanor, we started to get more and more gigs. And that's when I started to get more and more ropey with my voice. And so there did come a crunch point where I had to go to an ENT surgeon in my town at about the age of 21, 22. Because at that point I also joined an originals band. So I was doing the choir, which was quite a big show choir. I was doing a paid gig as a functions band, and then I was doing an originals band which had a gig and a rehearsal in the week as well. So then when that came over, I really got into trouble. So at that point I had to reassess my voice big time, which is where I started to look out for my vocal health and start to take a bit more notice of voice training, which wasn't very available where I lived.
Yes. So with the ENT, did he find that there was anything wrong? Was there a pathology there?
Apparently at the time, nodules, and I know from my extensive training now that
Yes.
The technology available at the time wouldn't have necessarily meant it was nodules. It could have been some other inflammation with phlegm on it, to be fair, that appeared like nodules, but nevertheless my voice was definitely in a state, and that the ENT definitely felt like he saw the swelling that would have turned into nodules. So at that point I went down a pathway of very basic speech therapy, some singing lessons, and that didn't necessarily make my life easier, because what I found out at that point is that I really had to rewind in the middle of a career. I had to rewind and unpick myself during being paid to perform, which I don't recommend.
No, we don't
Some people have
recommend
to
that.
do it. Yeah. So I guess some people really have to.
Yes.
Some people are really down the line with it. Some people may have to do it, and I've done it, so I can appreciate how hard it is to do that. Ideally you'd take a little bit of time off and try and get it going a little bit better before you have to start the next week again. But so it was a very tricky time for me, that one. It took me a long time to go forward again. So yeah, but fortunately I did it.
Yes. Well, there's two questions that arise for me. With those experiences that you encountered yourself as a professional performer, professional singer, with that heavy workload, and what you went through with the nodules, or supposed nodules, has that changed your approaches, or does that inform some of the decisions that you make in the voice studio as a teacher when you're working with professional artists? Like, do you feel that you have empathy or a greater understanding of what goes on in the field because you have been on those stages yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I can, because the empathy can be somewhat amplified, if you like, because the thing that I can't fully empathize with is being at a level which will be I sell records internationally based on this sound. Or if I cancel a show, it costs somebody $100,000. Those kind of situations are really, really tricky. And so as much as my experiences give me empathy, I sometimes I can't even imagine the pressure that's felt by somebody who has to make decisions based on that kind of money or that kind of pressure put on them. So I feel like the artists that I work with, yes, I can empathize to a level, but it does help me make the decisions. And sometimes, where there can be somewhat purist views in this world of vocal coaching. We're not trying to purify voices. That's not really the job. We're trying to make them
No.
functional.
Yes.
Functional. That's what they
Yes.
need to do.
Yes.
And functional night after night, day after day. And some things are just not worth changing at a certain point in life. It's intrinsic to that person. It may even been in their speech habits forever. And speech is so linked to personality. Are you going to change someone's personality at the age of 35 in the middle of a career? I don't think you are. I think what you've got to do is develop that tool belt to go, with a few exceptions, you can help someone to get functionality out of a lot of things if you understand that actually for someone to use that voice quality, it needs changes probably, and adjustments in the breathing system. It needs to be supported by resonance and vowels
Yeah.
differently to other
Yes.
ways of singing. So
Yes.
you can optimize, and then there may be some small compromises made here and there, but not a global readjustment of that singer in the middle of a career, which
Yeah.
will have them running away from vocal coaches. They won't want to see a vocal coach ever again. And so for us to do that job of not unpicking them is probably going to stand them in a good stead going down the line, because they'll need a coach again in the future. And if they've had a good experience, they will seek one out again. And if they haven't, they'll probably dig themselves into an even deeper hole. And I just would hate that to happen.
Yes. And that poses another question. And that is, look, I interviewed a singer a few weeks ago who was on the show, and she had a terrible experience with her first singing teacher, because she was singing non-classical music styles, so CCM styles or whatever anybody wants to call them. I'm not going to get into a big discussion about that. And I know for a fact that there are a lot of singers that don't go to singing teachers because they are concerned that a singing teacher is going to change the integrity of their sound, or try and have them sound in a way that they don't want to sound in terms of making money. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, and I have thought a fair bit about this. There was a time when everyone was talking about Adele, for example,
Oh,
and how
yes.
Adele
Yeah.
worked with some classical teachers before. And there was a news article, I think it was in the Guardian of the UK newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
where there was a couple of classical teachers who would say what they would do with Adele. And to be fair, it was interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
on some level, it was maybe a little bit, overconfident to say that Adele should learn classical technique. That's how she would get a better voice. I don't believe that at all. But I think there can be somewhat of a skewed view that classical solves things, because if you take Adele and you times her with classical technique, her identity is so strong
Yes.
that I don't think the classical technique would unpick her. I think
Mm-hmm.
it could integrate itself into her, because her identity won't let that classical technique change her too much. She's too strong for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best part about it. However, somebody who's not got as strong an identity, they may not even be professional, and they want to sing pop music. If they go into classical singing, they often end up sounding far too classical for their CCM style.
Or
And
too
that is, for
formal.
me, that's the
Yeah.
identity strength.
Yes. Yes. And when that whole situation happened with Adele, I was actually horrified to read a lot of the commentary that was posted in the forums on Facebook about why it happened, and shaming CCM singers. Like, as a CCM singer myself, and I had a 35-year career, um, I couldn't believe we were still having these discussions. It never ceases to amaze me. But yeah, I mean, all this high art, low art mentality almost started to re-emerge in a more public place. And with Adele, you can't separate the style. I mean, the style is what it is, but also what about the touring schedule? And what about the demands of that touring schedule? I mean, like, is that something when you have these professional performers come to you, do you look at all of that as well as, okay, this is going on with the voice?
Yeah, I do. All those considerations help us to form as well. Part of what we do is I can't overload someone with training. You know, I can't say, hey, you have to practice for an hour a day.
Hmm.
I know that would burn someone out, right? What
Yeah,
we need to do is trying to incorporate something that is highly effective in the shortest amount of time, and that doesn't mean it's a quick fix. I guess you could call it that because it's quick and it helps to work something out,
yeah,
but not in the traditional sense. Because what it needs to be is in a voice load of that size, you don't want to be loading it more. You
mm,
want to be trying to offset some of that load. So yeah, voice breaks come into use,
yeah,
and how can you get to that person's most primary function in the shortest amount of time in a day, and then they can incorporate something that can set them up within 15 minutes
mm,
or 20 minutes. And especially if they've got a show, it's like I know a lot of singers out there would say, I'm not really warmed up until I sing, or rather warm up for an hour before I do a show. A lot of pro singers could never do that. Could
no,
never warm up for an hour and sing
no,
2 hours after talking for 5 hours. It would just never happen. So if we're one of those people who need to warm up for an hour before a show, arguably we don't know our voices well enough at that point. We're still getting around problems that we don't understand. I think as we know our voices well enough better, we can get warm. If it's not just waking up out of bed, we can get warm within 10-15 minutes.
yes,
And if lifestyle isn't really getting in the way.
yes, yes. And lifestyle is a big one. Like for me, I was touring in a rock band, and it was the only time that I ran into problems with my voice, and it had nothing to do with misuse. It was just the demands of being on the road, being the chick singer in the band, having to lug with the guys when we couldn't afford roadies, the band bus picking us up very early in the morning. So it was sleep deprivation, lifestyle, diet, being in a rock band. It was all of that. And I had the training to support my voice, but I couldn't overcome everything else that was going on around me.
Yeah.
So, have you ever had to tell someone that, okay, you need to take a break, or have you always been able to help a singer in some way?
Very infrequently have I had to tell someone to take a break. Yeah, very infrequently. Although with some singers, especially when the stakes have been high, it's easy when someone isn't professional, but um, provided their job isn't really putting demands on them in their week 9 to 5 or whatever. I have had a couple of people where I've had to speak to their managers to help their
Mm-hmm.
managers understand that this is a pressured environment and the voice is a delicate thing, and much like the body and muscle, if you break muscle down, it builds itself back up again stronger. Much like you cut skin, there'll be a scar to reinforce the area. That sounds like such great stuff, but as soon as you start talking
Yeah.
about vocal folds,
Yes.
they rely on the absolute they don't need that kind of strengthening. They don't need to be like beaten down to be built back up again. So when managers, I think about singers, when they don't know enough about singers,
Mm-hmm.
they think about singers just like they think about weightlifters. And don't
Yeah.
worry, I tell you what, you'll be stronger if you push through it. And it's
Yeah.
just not true.
Yes.
We know that the vocal folds, if they get scarred, yes, it will make them stronger against further injury, but to get the beauty and
Mm-hmm.
all of the color that's available within the voice, they cannot get scarred and be better.
Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, a lot of managers look at singers as commodities. In my situation, I was told when I tried to resign from the band that I would never work again unless I stayed and fulfilled all the commitments. So I had to keep singing with the pathology. And that was rough. And it took me almost a year to recover from that
Wow.
experience. Yeah. And I was a single mum at the time and I needed the money and I couldn't afford not to work. And I was bullied and I believed that was the case. So I'm sure that a lot of that happens. So,
Oh, it does. It
yeah.
really does. And I do know an artist of, like right on the top level, who has described that same thing. Being coerced when feeling
Mm,
terrible to go and do a thing because you've had a loan from a record company. You have to pay it back.
yes.
It's like being under a loan shark's control half the
Yeah.
time. So
Yes.
getting to do that, sustained a vocal injury, that meant that an album could not be toured. And guess what, record company and managers, you lost a lot of money there, and that was your decision.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
really hope if any managers listen to this, you
Mm,
have sometimes you just have no idea what kind of catastrophe you could be making someone or
yeah.
pushing someone into by
Yes.
making them do something.
Yes. And as singers, we're already in our heads as it is. I mean, in one sense, we're pretty messed up, aren't we? We're a different breed.
It's a prerequisite to get a good
Yeah.
song out. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. So we don't need that kind of pressure externally. We put enough on ourselves.
Yeah.
Yep. So you teach singers and you work with singers across classical styles, musical theatre, professional touring singers, in CCM styles. So do you find that the pathologies or the issues with those working singers are different, or do you find that there's pretty much a commonality in the sorts of problems that they'll run into?
Oh no, I think it's so varied, because I guess the genesis of some and a lot of pathologies is about how the mind deals with it during the process. So someone's injury may come from how they try and preserve their voice, right? So that would be someone who's really worried about what the
Mhm.
outcome might be.
Yes.
Um, Somebody who makes a lot of effort singing, it's quite common, as I kind of agree with Dr. Bastian, who's like a really famous laryngologist, um, that a lot of people who make a lot of effort when they sing are not aware of that effort. So people who overdo their voice, they often say, "Yeah, my voice is fine every day." It
Yeah.
was fine every day, and then I sustained like loads of injuries, and quite often you might realize, listening back to the recordings, you might be like, "Oh, the sense of effort was not on your radar." That's the thing. I'm not sure the voice was always fine every day. I think it probably was giving them signs, but self-awareness, especially within the throat and the sensations that come there's such little to feel, and we can't directly control our larynx. We have to do it through indirect means and different ways of feedback, that we don't always know what's going on down there until it's gone wrong. So then you get those people who are hyper aware and try to save themselves. People who are under aware and don't know that they're burying themselves. They have all kinds of different outcomes to injury, and then how that injury is intervened to, how quickly it's dealt with, and how quickly that person can get on the path to recovery. The longer they leave it, the more chronic, the less likely they are to recover, because things like fear get a hold, anxiety gets a hold. It takes years to unpick that sort of stuff, and that would relate to things like muscle tension dysphonia and loads of
Yeah.
tension patterns. And
Yep.
oh my god, it's so complex, and all we need to do is we need to make, to avoid that complexity building up too much, we probably just need to have a way in every country to make sure that singers have a very fast way to be seen, and a very multidisciplinary and very quick way of getting into recovery,
Mhm.
because the career is very affected by that intervention.
Yes, we have quite a good system in place here in Australia with some of our touring musical theatre productions. That Debbie Filand, I'm not sure if you know of Deborah
No.
Filand. yeah, she has a program where they take care of singers, and they give them like manual therapies and things like that, and
Yeah.
really help them after a show, like vocal unloading,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah. So, and like in terms of musical theatre singers, some of that repertoire has become ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, what are these composers thinking? Some of the notes that they're expecting these singers to sing, the demands now from audiences for people to belt, they want to hear those notes. Have you seen a change in that repertoire over the years? Do you think it has become more demanding, or is it just, or are we more aware of it as a singing community?
Yeah, I think we're more aware of it, and I don't know. I don't know. I feel like now maybe I'm always quite aware that sometimes maybe it's just because I haven't got my eye on it that I feel like it's better. But when somebody who's really got their eye on it goes, no, 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 it's not. So I feel like the most recent of repertoire I've seen has been a little bit more about the vibe and the feeling and less about the range when it comes to contemporary. But 5 years ago, and obviously
Yeah.
that stuff is still really like popular now and being toured and whatnot. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there's a big piece in there. There was it was just getting higher and higher and higher. And I remember when I
Yes.
first heard once upon a time in Brooklyn when it's like A flat, F sharp belted on the top, and I'm just like, oh my God, every song I hear just gets higher and more intense and higher and more intense. And which means that, sometimes the singer who sings it might only sing, I don't know, 5, 6 songs in a show. They might only really sing for 25 minutes in total, but
Yes.
that 25 minutes is full on, right? I'm
Yes.
there going, I sing 2 hours. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, but that's Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
it's
Well,
not it's not the same as
yeah.
this. So yeah,
Yeah.
then you add the dialogue, and maybe that person might be shouting as part of their character, really emotional. Before you know it, it's like burnout.
Yes. Gosh, in my day when I was performing professionally, I would do 4 hour, 5 hour solo gigs.
Goodness me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I couldn't do that now. Or I would know that, to be fair, I would have to do a lot of training to get myself to that vocal fitness.
Oh yeah, I
And
think that is about, like, you have to experience that. The only way you can train for that is to experience it, isn't it? You got to get
mhm,
yourself ready, but goodness me, getting on that train,
yeah,
there'd be a lot of
yeah.
learning.
Yes, and I mean, I was doing like at least 5 gigs a week, doing that
Wow.
number of hours. But yeah, I was really vocally fit, but not at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like
I'll
the
turn down
mechanic.
gigs.
Yeah, I'm like the mechanic with the car. I look after everyone else's car, and I kind of, oh yeah, mine will be fine, because
Yeah.
I'm just
Oh
teaching
yeah.
now, which is a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
bad thing to say. But anyway, let's go back to you and your training. And I know that you first started your training doing some SLS work to become a teacher.
That's right.
Yes. So that would have been a very interesting experience. But back at the time when you probably started looking into and studying SLS, it was probably taught very differently to how it is now, because it's probably been a little watered down over the years. Um, so, how was that for you? And like, did it leave you wanting to know more after studying SLS?
Yeah, I mean, the SLS aspect was as well. What was great about it in the beginning was I heard about it along with, I think it was probably about 5 other teachers who all were in the choir with me, and we all kind of worked together in a place called Southampton in the UK. So when you've got 5 people together learning the same thing, it's a lovely little group of. It's not like you're like a lone teacher just kind of working it out on your own. You've got people to talk to. So when we
Yes.
went to all these SLS seminars, that information and that, I guess, pedagogical structure was brand new to us. We
Mm.
really didn't have that kind of awareness. So that part of it was really excellent, and the people that I met within SLS, Some of the teachers I still talk to now, John Henney is one of them. Really amazing people and amazing teachers, communicators, so
Mhm.
good. There's no way you can teach 25 years of anything without being a great communicator.
Yes.
So you've got that aspect, and have a business, of course. That's the other
Yes.
part.
Yes.
So I met some really amazing colleagues that I still talk to now. But as with anything, I think a structure gives you a great place to start.
Mm-hmm.
When you're sat there in front of a singer and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know where to begin, it gives you somewhere to begin.
Yes.
And that's valuable, even if that place to begin is partly partly not quite right and doesn't really lead you towards the most effective route, but then you're not an expert when you first started. So that's a great part about pedagogical structures like that. But of course, structure can come with rigidity.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly because of the way that when I was in SLS, the way that they assessed you and that you kept your status was to be very rigid within that structure, to tick the boxes that were deemed to be the right ones to tick, and not bring in any other techniques that weren't from within the organization. And
Yes.
like,
Yes.
I don't think any organization can run entirely insularly like that. That's never going to work. But it did run like that. That's the
Yes.
unfortunate part.
Yes.
So
I
of
know.
course, when information comes in from the outside, and people with sort of really great sort of concerns in the teaching, but they'll bring in these things like vocal science and maybe even massage and all these kind of subjects, but they would be rejected initially by the organization as being not something we're going to be looking into. So that's when, for example, I left that organization because of that inflexibility. And I know a lot of organizations throughout the world experience similar things at certain times.
Yes. And you have quite a remarkable toolkit. You you just have so much knowledge. I think you're amazing. So where have you acquired all of that? Because I mean, it's very eclectic. So obviously you've picked up bits and pieces from everywhere, or I'm assuming from everywhere.
Yeah. I think when you first come out of your structure, for example, and you're aware there's new stuff, I think, and that was probably like, more than 10 years ago now.
Mhm.
You tend to go out and just kind of try everything. It's a bit unstructured, almost a bit frantic. What is there? I'll try something
Yeah,
new.
I like that
Um,
word, frantic.
yeah,
Yeah,
frantically trying
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So you have that, but then actually that gives you an opportunity to see actually what might not work for your clientele. Maybe I misunderstood it, who knows? But there's stuff that didn't work, there's stuff that did work. That starts to carve out a sort of a broader direction. But then I used to listen to a lot of fitness podcasts, and one thing I still kind of do is, unfortunately, I'm not really an academic person. I'm not that interested in going to
Really?
university. Well, I love to study. I research, but I don't have an interest to go to university. I don't know why, because I feel like in the direction I want to go, if there was a university course that I could help to carve out for myself, right? It would be terrific, because then
Mhm.
it's sort of a partly self-led journey, right? So
Yes.
I used to listen to a lot of fitness podcasts, and one guy I used to listen to was called Ben Coomber, and he used to just say back in the day, "I'll find someone who knows, and I'll work with them." And
Mhm.
that's it. And I basically did that. So I ended up working. I work a lot with Ingo Tietze privately, because I just love the guy, and he knows so much. Brad Story is also another really sort of gracious educator, who helps me understand the acoustics. Getting hold of people through my podcast, The Naked Vocalist, I
Yes.
ended up meeting people like Robert Sasuma, who's a somatic educator, Meribeth Dame, who was another type of, I guess, voice work that was all body but energy. And all through my time, I'd just be working with these teachers directly and just getting their perspective, and
Yes.
those I very, very much value those people, because those kind of people have sort of shaped my direction in coaching and helped me figure out really out of so much that I could spend time looking at what is going to be really good for the people that I'm most aligned to help, because I can't help everybody, and I'm definitely better at helping some people than others, different genres than others. So if
Hmm.
I can stick in those lanes and find the tools that work terrifically within those lanes and somewhat get creative with how I interpret those tools, or even just scientific information, I can create something really good for the people that I align with.
Yes. Did you find then when you started to branch out and frantically look into all this other information and all this other training, did you find that the people that you were working with, that their sounds also started to change? And I'm not saying this to be disrespectful in any way, but from what I've heard of SLS singers, a lot of them have their own sound. Like it's very much, to me, a generic sound. Did you find that your students' sounds started to change also?
Well, you know what we said earlier about the classical and the identity of the singer.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel that's the same way for SLS in some ways. SLS has some very high end, probably the most high end of clients in history.
Yes. Yes.
Michael Jackson,
Yes.
Stevie Wonder. I mean, I don't need to
Kelly
list
Clarkson.
anymore.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
That was the big thing here in Australia when SLS came out. They were pushing all the big singers, and yeah, it was like this army of people infiltrating our country.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny that because of the way that I guess when the information filters down into the organization, a low larynx, for example, yes, it can be rather a useful thing for someone who's experiencing chronic muscle tension dysphonia of some type.
Hmm.
It can be useful for that. It can be a way to stretch the muscles that lift larynx, of course, because they can become dysfunctional when they're used a lot. So the low larynx is not a problem, but it became as a almost a catch-all, almost a it solves everything, or I don't know what to do, so I'm going to lower the larynx. You know, that these are all the kind of things that happen to new teachers who have been given a tool. And I would, when I first training, I would have been guilty of that as well, because I didn't know what to do, and this was the thing that worked the most often to people
Yes.
who were struggling with tension. So that basically, I think, gathers so much that it probably pins itself to an organization as a thing that they do, right?
Mhm.
So you have that aspect. So that I think that contributed to the potential for SLS singers to sound a particular way. But when you listen to Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder, they are the antithesis of that thing that SLS were known for. And what
Yes.
does that tell you? That tells you that those singers' identities were so strong
Mm.
that they only really enveloped what was useful for them from that coach, and didn't take on the stuff to stuff that too far, like a low
Yeah.
larynx,
Hmm.
in order. And that's when you get these, I guess, I think sometimes misunderstandings about that technique helping that singer the most. And I think it's way more complicated than that. The singer
Yes.
takes on what they take on, and that's
Yes.
not everything.
Yes, that's so true. I mean, we all take on the information that we believe is going to serve us, and what we don't think is going to serve us, we discard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, I would like to move on to your assessment program. You have created a new program. This is one of the new things that you've been working on and you've introduced. Tell us about this program. I have dabbled a little bit, and that was through the Vocal Health First Aider program. And I thought it was fascinating. And I loved the holistic approach that the body is, a part of like the larynx is a part of the whole body, which I think a lot of people forget about. So, yeah, go for it. Tell us all about it.
Nice. Yeah. Well, this yeah, definitely is the fruit of a lot of I guess initially that frantic searching, but where I rested upon, and much like when I listen to a podcast, I listen to one that's on neurobiology
Mm-hmm.
by Andrew Huberman, which is a really amazing podcast, and his is 90 minutes, and he explains the mechanisms around something like, I don't know, stimulating adrenaline, right? You know, and why would adrenaline be good for us? Well, it can help learning, blah 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 blah. But what he does is he does give you the much deeper view of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what he could do is just tell you 15 minutes. He could just do a 15-minute one on the protocol that you should follow in order to gain this skill. But it wouldn't be applied as well by the person listening to that protocol. Also, if that person wanted to know more about that protocol, they wouldn't be able to take on information from other sources as well if they don't know the mechanisms behind how something works. So not only does it help you apply stuff better, but it helps you to read literature that would previously exclude you because of your lack of understanding of what's going on in that literature. So
Wow.
when I look at assessment methods in that way,
Mm-hmm.
what we do is we look at the whole body and its effect on the voice,
Yes.
because we must expand that view for us to truly say that that exercise is definitely going to solve that problem, or rather more likely to solve that problem, because we're
Mm-hmm.
never 100% sure.
Yes.
So if we've got that systematic view of the voice, then we can generate what would be a working hypothesis. So if we move different body parts, we measure the voice range dynamics, points where transitions feel like they happen, things like vocal fry, for me, is an important check on someone's voice as well. When we have all these in place, we could create a working hypothesis. And it has to be a working hypothesis because it's a diagnosis. A singer can get too hold of a diagnosis and sort of say, well,
Yes.
I pull
Yes.
my chest voice. And
Yes.
sometimes they're not doing what they believe they have because it
Mm.
was given too strong a diagnosis in the beginning. So with this assessment methods, it helps you to kind of go, here's the hypothesis. It might be this. Let's try this, but we have to respect how this might be a cascading effect in the system, and we can quickly redirect. So I've generated that course as a way for a singing teacher to understand that process, and also what it does. You look at the information that you gain from vocal assessments. Part of it is also to challenge your own biases. So you might listen to someone and say, well, I reckon this is going on. But when you lay out some information about that singer and the assessment methods you've done, sometimes we get these results that go, well, it can't be. Maybe what I first thought, it can't really be that. It's not behaving as I expected it to be. And that allows you to not just make a judgment based on someone singing half a song in front of you, or in some cases, just
Mm.
singing a single scale.
Yes.
It is based on so much more, and it does challenge bias. And what's really great in the first version I did of the workshop, which was in person, can't do that right now,
Yep.
in person, I had a voting software, which is really good, that you could do on your phone. So we had people sing,
Oh,
everyone would vote what they thought it was.
yes.
We would run the assessment methods, and they and do a little bit of work, and they would all vote again, and you just see the graph change. And it might be like, yeah, it's breathing, yeah, it's this, and then suddenly everyone's like, all right, yeah, probably it's a register then, or actually no, I think this person's just got a skewed idea of what singing is. You know, it really, because really everything, really, you can track it back up to the head, can't you, every time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the great part. So I know that biases lead decisions, and we do need a bit of that in some way to be more efficient. We can't just test everything, otherwise the singer would never get a bloody voice lesson.
That's so
But
true. Yes.
we do need to kind of go, okay, if I'm going to have a bias, or rather a strong opinion, it needs to be based on way more information than it currently is.
Yes. And one thing you neglected to say, though, and is that it's well, I don't know if it's the whole program. I only know the part of the program that I did, and it was all movement based. And the assessment was all based on movements, some as simple as putting your arms up in the air, some marching. And can I tell you that I went and did some of them the very next day after I did your modules? And one of the students, I had her put her arms up in the air, and she just was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, wow, you're a miracle worker. What did you just do? I said, no, I just got you to put your arms up in the air. I actually didn't you know. So some of those things, not only are they great assessments, but some of them work instantly.
Instantly. Yeah, absolutely.
Instantly.
And those arms, to be fair, the arms, their influence on the way you hold your weight in your body, your hips, absolutely your ribs and the shoulder.
Yes.
The shoulder and the rib synchronicity is massive. Those arms going up in the air, they change the sternum, and the sternum anchors the larynx from the bottom. It changes the head position. Arms are madness. And also, if you move the arms, they contract the diaphragm, because the diaphragm is there to provide your trunk with stability so you don't fall over while you're waving your arms around.
Yes.
So the arms are a major pathway to someone singing. And again, what you need is, and what I hopefully will, be able to provide, which is in the assessment methods course, is lots of evidence of how the arms affect the voice. And then what you've narrowed it down to is one body part, but 10 uses for that body part, which is actually really great, because then it seems like somebody says, oh, he always does the same thing. But actually, sometimes you can do one thing, but with 10 rationales. And actually, I'm not doing the same thing. It looks like I am, but I'm not.
Yes.
Because you've got a very deep understanding of how that affects the mechanics of the voice and the system of the voice.
And what I love about it too is that the student can go home and do that. You don't have to be there showing them how to do it. I love anything that the student can just take away and do really simply and easily, and they don't have to turn themselves inside out trying to remember what it was that they did.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty of that system as well. So where are you doing this now? Like, how are you conducting this program?
I'm doing it online right now. So I'm literally entering the final week of this last run that I'm doing. So I've done a 7-week run on that, and that does involve the movement aspect for 2 weeks, more mechanism behind that. But as you say, the movement part is the one that I did with the Vocal Health Organization, because the singer doesn't need any knowledge to perform those, and neither, to be fair, would the teacher.
No.
If you both can hear that they say it felt easier and you say it sounded like a bit easier, then it's like, great. Nobody needs a lot of background to do that. But when you get into more deep assessments, which is where the other weeks come in, we need a bit more information around how the vocal folds function, how they vibrate, how they interact with air, resonances, articulators, and obviously affects that, always bringing it back to how the singer is thinking about their voice and how they might be planning for it. So we've got all those deeply. So I've just finished all those weeks, and we're into teaching and doing assessments live online. So that's where I do it. And I've just started a brand new company called teachvoice.com, which is where, going forward, I will be running courses and mentorships and all kinds of stuff, basically, from that organization. I've been teacher training for a long time, but it's just been under my name. So just recently I got that company together, and that will be
what is it called?
It's teachvoice.com.
Okay, we are going to share all your links in the show notes. So it'll be to your assessment program, to your podcast, everything. So
lovely.
Yes. So what other projects are you working on, which are part of that Teach Voice?
Yeah, well, I just before that, I finished a registers program for anybody which is looking at quite like a functional voice training program. So I have vocal assessment methods, I have registers, and one I've done 2 or 3 times, but not in the last year. I have an articulators program because for me, the tongue is a very wonderful, amazing, powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Also, can be a major pain in the bum thing. So
Yes.
I think we need to know about how that tongue behaves and how we can use it. So the articulators for me is very useful. So
Yeah.
I have those three training programs at the moment. But what they will come under is what I found useful in my training is I spent time with teachers and with someone like a mentor that I could talk to, along with sort of programs and education that I could work along with on my own. So, partly self-study, lots of group work. What teachers don't do now is teach in front of each other, which because everyone's
Yes.
really afraid of it, but I think it's
Yes.
crucial.
Yes, that is so true. That is so true. Sometimes our teaching community is not as supportive as what they can be. Sometimes our teaching community can be rather unkind also,
Absolutely.
to be fair. And yeah, I mean, that's why I never comment anywhere on Facebook. I'm too scared. I feel like they're going to get out the voodoo doll and start sticking pins into it. But no, no, no. But that is amazing. And you're right. We should all be collaborating and we should all be working together for the good of our students.
Absolutely. And I just implore anybody who's teaching on their own, it's like the thought of teaching in front of somebody, um, it probably scares a lot of people to death. And it feels nice to stay on your own because there's nobody passing any comment. And the thing is, it's not judgment, but you can't, I don't think you can take the quickest path to really successful teaching
Yes,
without taking that step to
yes,
expose what like let me look inside that lesson and help you.
hmm,
And it might not be, we're not trying to always solve problems. Like I'll look inside the lesson and go, what are you doing with that singer? That's the wrong thing to do. It's like, no, that singer improved. All we can say is, on what other levels is that singer wanting to improve, and how can we redirect that, or have that of that thing that you've discovered that works? How many iterations can you generate that exercise so it enhances the learning of that singer,
hmm.
and how much they take on that physical skill? So, a lot of the times we're just helping the singer to optimize further what they're doing, as well as help them with new knowledge. So I really believe that we do need to let people inside our lessons more often.
Yes. And you've been so generous in the way that you've helped everybody in our community. You have your podcast as well, The Naked Vocalist, and there's been over 60 episodes
That's right.
and over 400,000 downloads. I was excited that I had 750 this week. You know,
That
but
is still
hey,
quite a lot in a week.
but I'm just saying, like it's that is massive and that's a lot of work to get it there. When you go back and you listen to your early podcasts, do you ever cringe, or in terms of the format of the show or the quality of the production, or even what you thought to be right at the time and what you may know now?
Oh yeah, cringe, cringe, cringe. For up to episode 20,
Oh,
probably.
really?
Oh yeah, but we were just rolling with it and whatever. But so that was kind of cool. And the first episode we did, the pilot, if you'd like to call it
Mhm.
that, I asked one of my students who I knew was the most or held the least back, if you like, from
Yes,
me.
yes.
So he was good. And to be fair, about the first two that we recorded, he was like, "You guys talk too much. You talk too much." And I was then so we recorded two to have them panned, and then we recorded the third one. And just kind of went, well, let's just release this one. I don't care anymore. Let's just release this one. So we just did it anyway, and we got the ball rolling. And
Yes,
funny enough, they're still really popular. The early ones are very
yes,
popular.
yes.
Um, our views might have changed since then, our style has changed since then, but
Mhm.
it certainly hasn't been to the detriment of my career to just let them be.
No,
It's
no,
fine. It's
definitely
just a
not.
journey at the end of the
Yes,
day, and I think if we can
yes.
get comfortable with that, like saying, how I sounded, even the way I laughed back then annoys me now.
Really?
Yeah, but
How
it's
did
just the
you
way it
laugh back
is.
then?
Oh, I don't know, but it was
Come on,
probably
you have
definitely
to give
too
us
much.
one of those laughs.
I think it's probably very high pitched. Hang on, is this my teen years coming back to haunt me again?
Oh, is that what it is?
Possibly. But what's good, I think what's good about that is because I edited them. I transcribed them. So I all of the words that we said in those episodes are etched in my head. And I think you get better at doing it because you listen back to all the
Yes,
things
yes,
and think I've got to stop
yes,
talking at that point.
yes.
And that's how I think the skills would hone because of all the listening back. So it's horrible to listen back, but it
It
makes it
is.
better in the long run.
It is. And it's interesting what you said that, you thought, oh, we're just going to put it out there. But you can't wait in life. You can't wait for things to be perfect. And you
No,
can't perfect something that you haven't done. And that was the view that I took with this podcast. I set a date and I thought, I'm just going to launch and I'm going to perfect it as I go because I can't perfect it if it's not out there.
that's
and
right.
and that's what you have to do. And even just doing a podcast, it can be quite a feeling of being vulnerable too. You're talking about teachers being in a room together. Like at first it was, wow, you really feel like you're putting yourself out there, and then you go, well, you know what, I feel good about it. And it's also a creative outlet, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, in a lot of ways. And it can
Yes.
be somewhat selfish. It's like, I mean, I've learned so much from
Yes,
doing my podcast.
yes, every episode, absolutely, and that's what I think also. So you've got so much on your plate. I mean, you're doing, and the baby and the house move, and there's been COVID. I mean, what do you do personally? What does Chris do to take care of yourself? Because you did say to me that since COVID, it has given you a kick up the butt to take better care of yourself because you have lost family members to COVID also.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And at the moment, yeah, like because of a young family and things like gyms not being open until just a week or two ago, that's been a kind of tricky time, if you like to, and moving house as well. We've been relocating cities, so it's been kind of tricky. And for me, doing some of the research I've been doing recently, there are some very simple things to look at in life. I think when it comes to almost your primal body's function, and one of the things I've been doing is trying to get in the sunlight more, right? And there's been reasons for that. Like if you read it, people
Yes,
read stuff all the
vitamin
time, and it
D.
says, yeah, well, there's vitamin D. There's what I learned about recently was a molecule that's stimulated by UV light, but only UV light into your eyes.
Oh,
So wearing sunglasses won't stimulate this molecule, but the molecule is to do with melanin, which is the pigmentation, but it links to ghrelin, which is an appetite hormone. And so
okay.
um, when if we get enough sunlight directly into not looking into the sun, but it's bright outside, so
Mhm.
as long as those
Yes,
photons are going into your eyes,
yes,
you're getting this stimulus, and your body will manage its hunger way better if you
really?
get some sunlight in directly into your eyes, off reflections. And that is why we eat more in winter, apparently, because it's such less of an intense sunlight in winter that we're our hormones switch to us eating more. So
Right.
if we stay in the morning for too long, or we're
Yes,
stuck in the office all day with
yes,
no sunlight, you
yes,
can start to
yes,
eat, and it makes so much sense. And the other thing that sunlight works with is the good side of cortisol and adrenaline,
yes.
all of which are there for us to focus and learn and be
Mm-hmm.
awake.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is why we don't want the sunlight too much, or rather bright light at night.
Yeah.
When you don't want cortisol to keep you awake, you want want it to go away so you can go to sleep. So for me, the outdoors is like the most simple way of thinking. This is doing so many good things for my body right now.
Mm-hmm.
That if I am stuck in an office all day, I can be alert, be awake, start this process of self-care. And vitamin D has been shown to be really effective against the symptoms of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do have a pandemic that rushes around the world again, and who'd have thought that we would have,
Yes.
if we have been getting this sunlight and we've been getting outdoors, we might all be way better off as a population if we could just get out more.
Yes, but it would be harder in the UK because is your sunlight months are limited. Like it gets dark fairly early, and the winter can be quite cold and miserable.
Yeah, and it is true that if you were to cycle naked for 7 hours a day,
Billy
right?
Connolly, didn't he?
Oh,
do
is that what he did?
He did that. Yes.
Well, let's say
No,
we're
on a
Billy Connolly.
motorbike.
Yeah, totally. Let's say we're Billy Connolly. If you're
Yeah.
outside of the 6 months of summer, if you like, if you're in like October, and you were to do that, the sunlight wouldn't be strong enough to generate a single shred of vitamin D in your body if you're in the UK. And other countries would be obviously a little bit worse. So
Yes.
so we have that aspect. So we have to supplement vitamin D in those downtime, the 6 months of winter.
Yes.
And autumn and winter. So it really is important that we can look at that. And for singers, vitamin D is to stay happy and healthy. You'll cancel way less gigs if you're able to do that as well.
Good. That's very good advice. Very good advice. So we're going to go to a last couple of questions. And the first one I'd like to ask you is, who has been your greatest influence as a teacher?
Oh, there are quite a few. I think the one that spurred me on into looking at voice science more, and not that voice science is everything, but rather voice science was the reason I stepped out of my original box, which is why I love it so much, because it was the reason that I explored so much other stuff.
Yes.
So on that sense, I have to thank John Henney for that, because he was the first one to mention this stuff to me, and I didn't understand a word he was saying. But I was like, okay, formants, harmonics.
That. Yes.
Well, I have an EQ in my head. What?
Yes.
What?
Yes. I felt like that when I went and did vocal pedagogy. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Just like, but you just like keep at it. But in recent years, I'd say the body side of it, Robert Sassouma has turned my brain onto so much over the last sort of 4 years or whatever since I discovered him, that I really also appreciate his influence.
Wow. And you've had so much education, and your training is very impressive, because I know you've done a lot of auxiliary training as well. So if I was a new teacher, or I was thinking about teaching and I came to you, what advice would you give me as to where to start? Where do I start to gain my knowledge from?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the process is, there's no substitute for learning how to do something yourself. That doesn't apply to all singers, but to go through a process, sometimes frustrating, of resolving an issue that you've had forever, and you just know there'd be an answer out there for it. Some teachers haven't got their heads around certain registers in their voice, some of the more basic ones, and for those teachers, it's like, hey, listen, if you struggle with chest voice, work it out. Work out chest voice, because you're going to need those skills if you're going to begin to help and be able to empathize with them. So I think learning to do something yourself is really important.
Yeah.
And when I talk to teachers about starting, if I start a teacher on a journey, I start them on style first, because again, offsets, onsets. You don't even need to get into range.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to get into color.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be highly dynamic, but we start off on that. And what that helps the singer to do is understand how someone learns, because repetition, blocking, all these motor learning skills, they can apply to how you teach someone style and how someone becomes perceptive, how they listen, how they mimic and interpret information and repeat it back to you. That kind of stuff can be learned in style, and arguably those two things are very at the core before you even start to learn about how the larynx functions and technical exercises. So that's my best advice, as well, how I get teachers on that journey first.
Yes. And to me, that sounds like someone who, once again, where your performance career has an influence on your teaching. Do you feel that if you didn't have that career, that you may not feel this way about it, about the training?
Yeah, I think so, and I think there are plenty of teachers out there that haven't had a performance career who are wonderful teachers.
Absolutely.
And and the vice versa, plenty of amazing performers that might not be great teachers, right? So you have that aspect. Now, the best combination has to be you've been a performer and you're a teacher.
Yes.
Right. And
yes.
you got the right thing. But either way, if you haven't performed, I think you can be very gracious and very open about how you work with people to make that work. So there are influences, but I think the empathy of things, and also if you've been a performer and you've gone into vocal trouble, and as a performer I have experienced and had to get my butt out of holes. If you've got your butt out of a hole, I tell you what, you really are. And most people who go into vocal health, by the way, who work to rehabilitate people, have been injured, because it does take that level of empathy, and also that level of that kind of experience to even make you think about going, I want to help people.
Yes. Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up there. And look, thank you so much, Chris. You've been very, very generous in sharing so much information with us on the show. And we are going to share all your links in the show notes, and everyone will be able to find you. They can find your website, your new teachvoice.com program will be on there as well. We wish you all the very best, and I'd love to have you back on the show again sometime in the future.
Thank you so much, Marissa.
Thank you. Take it easy. And
thank you.
Keep
Bye.
laughing.
No sign of that stopping.
No, great. Me neither. Take care. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.